What's up, Bucs fans and Pewter people? Bailey Adams from PewterReport.com back with you as we continue our Bucs 50 Most Memorable Games series, which will take us all the way up to Week 1 of the 2025 regular season, the Bucs' 50th season as an NFL franchise. We're really just days away from that being the case. The 50th season, of course, already underway with the preseason now in the books, but we've got all eyes on Week 1, that game at Atlanta, which is just about a week and a half away at this point. We are now on to Week 9 of this series, the penultimate stop on this journey through Bucs history. Of course, we started in July with 1976, 1977, and we've really been going chronologically week by week, each Thursday with 5 games at a time. So we've got games 41 through 45 this week, games 46 through 50 wrapping things up next Thursday, Week 10, and the final week of our series, just days before that season opener at Atlanta. Of course, if you missed last week's video or any of the videos in our series, we have these back up on Pewter Report TV YouTube channel for you. Of course, last week's covered games 36 through 40 on the list, with the 40th game being the Bucs Super Bowl 55 win over the Chiefs. So naturally, we'll pick back up this week in 2021, the Bucs opening up their Super Bowl title defense at home on Thursday Night Football as the kickoff game for the NFL season. They're hosting the Super Bowl, or they were hosting the Super Bowl celebration, and they were hosting the Dallas Cowboys coming off of that Lombardi Trophy, the second in franchise history. This is also a special game for Tom Brady. It was his 300th NFL regular season start, which was an NFL record, and the Bucs were putting up their Super Bowl signage and celebrating the championship they were just coming off of course, on this night as well. Bucs started early. They scored a 5-yard touchdown pass from Brady to Chris Godwin, but the Cowboys tied things up late in the first with a 22-yard touchdown pass from Dak Prescott to CeeDee Lamb. Then at the 9:48 mark, who else would connect but Brady and Rob Gronkowski for a 2-yard touchdown pass. Unfortunately for the Bucs, the Cowboys would eventually grab momentum even after a Greg Zuerlein missed field goal as Ronald Jones fumbled the ball away and led to a 27-yard touchdown drive, with Amari Cooper catching a 5-yard touchdown from Dak Prescott to make it a 14-13 game. Greg Zuerlein missed the extra point on that, so the Bucs still did have the lead. But on the next drive, Brady was intercepted on the first play, and that led to what was a field goal drive. Greg Zuerlein kicking a field goal to make it 16-14 Dallas. But the Bucs did have a very quick response. They responded right away with Tom Brady finding Antonio Brown for a 47-yard touchdown. This was just after Jaden Mickens returned the ensuing kickoff after the field goal, 41 yards, to set the Bucs up. And there's AB there with a 47-yard touchdown catch to give the Bucs back to the lead. Then Dallas missed another field goal on its next drive before Brady was intercepted again at the end of the half. So a little bit of sloppiness on both sides of things. And then the Cowboys out of halftime got within 21-19 before a Carlton Davis third interception later in the quarter led to another Gronk touchdown, an 11-yard touchdown pass from Brady to Gronk. And that made it 28-19. It looked like the Bucs kind of had this one. They were feeling it at this point. It was getting late in the third quarter, but the Cowboys did have another response. A 10-play, 75-yard drive got them back into the ball game, getting in within a 28-26 game. And then as Tampa Bay was threatening to put the game away, it was just about 5 minutes to go. They got inside the Dallas 15, only for Chris Godwin to fumble the ball away at the 2-yard line. And that gave an opening for the Dallas Cowboys as they would go on an 11-play drive that ended in a go-ahead field goal by Greg Zuerlein. That made it 29-28 with 1:24 to go. But there was still some magic left in this one because Tom Brady was the Bucs quarterback. This was the definition of these 2 seasons, 2 or 3 seasons for Brady, was the late game heroics and the benefit of having Tom Brady as your quarterback. He led the drive. Giovanni Bernard, as Stephen Shea would say, an 8-yard and a 4-yard catch to get the drive going. Gronk had a 6 and a 20-yard catch, back to back. Then Chris Godwin would make the big play, getting a 24-yard catch down to the 18-yard line. 3 incompletions later, it was Ryan Suckup who would be the hero of the night for the Bucs, connecting on a game-winning field goal, a 36-yard field goal. That was after the 48-yard field goal by Zuerlein. A 36-yard field goal, making it 31-29 with 2 seconds to go, and the Bucs would be able to finish it off with those 2 seconds left, getting the win on opening night, getting the win to kick off the NFL season. It was a 2-touchdown night for Brady and Gronk. That connection, of course, That brought the duo's total for their careers to 100 on their careers. Brady was 32 of 50 for 379 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Antonio Brown, who had that big touchdown catch early. AB had five catches for 121 yards and a touchdown. And despite the fumble, Godwin had a 100-yard game himself, 105 yards and a touchdown on 9 catches. This was the Bucs' 9th straight win dating back to the previous December. Of course, those counting the playoff run to Super Bowl 55. So the Bucs were ripping them up. 9 straight wins with this one in the books. But the next game on our list, actually, we'll kind of skip ahead a little bit, all the way into December of the 2021 season. And it was a big marquee matchup between the Bucs and the Bills at Raymond James Stadium. It was a fun one for some, I guess. The neutral fan is probably one of the more thrilling games of that regular season. For the Bills fans, the first half, it was not fun to watch. For the Bucs fans, second half was not fun to watch. It was just one of those games going back and forth. It looked early on like the Bucs had this one. I mean, it was 9-3 Bucs. They were hosting Josh Allen and the Bills, who were 7-5 coming into this one, looking for some momentum late in the season. But the Bucs went up big early. It was Leonard Fournette rushing for a 47-yard touchdown early on to get things going. And then Ryan Suckup in the second quarter hit a field goal, and then Tom Brady hit Mike Evans for a touchdown, giving the Bucs a big lead to start things off, 17-0. And then eventually Brady would run for a touchdown to make it 24-3 by halftime. So the Bucs had a 21-point lead at halftime. Looked like they were getting ready to bury the Bills. Look at that picture right there, though. Mike Evans with all the fans. And I know the added fun to this one was the fact that this was a team that the Bucs don't play a ton. I know they've just played them in the preseason. They'll play them again in the regular season, but this was a really marquee matchup on a Sunday afternoon, and the fans were fired up for this one for sure. But the Bills would have a response, of course. The Bills have Josh Allen. They're going to have a response. Josh Allen ran for an 18-yard touchdown in the third quarter, and even after the Bucs, after that, the Bucs took a 27-10 lead in the fourth. Felt like they were in control, only they weren't. Allen threw a 15-yard touchdown to Dawson Knox with 9:07 to go, and then found Gabriel Davis for a 4-yard touchdown with 4:53 left, and that got them within 27-24. At the 22-second mark, then the Bills got even. Tyler Bass capped a 14-play, 70-yard drive with a game-tying 25-yard field goal to send things to overtime. And at that point, the Bucs defense was tired. They had given up this big lead. Offense wasn't really clicking. And then the Bills won the coin toss to start overtime. So it was not looking good for the Bucs in this one, but the Bucs defense was able to step up. They forced a 3-and-out, and then the Bucs on offense kind of got things going. But before a 3rd and 3 from the Bucs 42, needed this one, and they needed just the 3 yards to get it. But instead, Tom Brady hit Brashad Perriman over the middle, across the middle, and Perriman took it 58 yards for a walk-off touchdown. This was maybe one of the loudest, I've ever heard Raymond James Stadium. This was the walk-off aspect of it. Tom Brady, obviously, this was a milestone pass for Tom Brady. It was his 700th touchdown pass, and it was after he surpassed Drew Brees for the NFL's completions record earlier in the game. So this was a big one, but I think it was just the walk-off aspect of it. It was the type of play it was. Brashad Perriman racing down the sideline. Bills could not catch him, and it was quite the celebration inside of Raymond James Stadium. This made the Bucs 6-0 at home on the season, so they were playing really, really well in front of the home fans at Raymond James Stadium. Look at all of them. They're going crazy with the team celebrating that victory. Brady was 31 of 46 in this game for 363 yards and 2 touchdowns, plus he ran for another in what was his 10th straight win over the Bills, and it made him 33-3 all-time against Buffalo. Of course, he dominated them for 20 years with the Patriots, and then he still got another one over them against the Bucs at home in this game. Leonard Fournette ran 19 times for 113 yards and a touchdown in this one, plus Devin White and Shaq Barrett on the defense had 1.5 sacks each. And this was Richard Sherman, the game where Richard Sherman would record his lone interception as a Buck, and that came in the first half. So, future Hall of Famer and Richard Sherman had 1 interception in his short stint with the Bucs, and it came in this game. So that was notable as well. And then shortly after that, it was just a few weeks later, the Bucs the turn of the new year, January 2nd, 2022, we're going up to the Meadowlands. It was Bucs Jets, and this one was a very memorable game, a big win for the Bucs in the end. Probably one of the more bizarre afternoons for not just the Bucs and not just Buccaneer fans, but I think it's one of the more bizarre things I've seen on a football field. We'll get on to that, of course. It was an ugly one early on for the 11-4 Bucs. They were struggling against a 4-11 Jets team led by Zach Wilson, and kind of wondering what was going on here. The Jets went up 17-10 before halftime, and then went up 24-10 in the third, which, the Bucs put the Bucs in a hole, and then the game reached a really new level of weird. Even beyond the fact that the 4-11 Jets were up by 14 on the 11-4 Bucs and Tom Brady. This is when things got weird, as Antonio Brown took off his shoulder pads, took off his helmet, and I think he threw his undershirt into the crowd. And despite trying to get talked down by Mike Evans and the Bucs on the sideline, he made his very public exit from the team and the NFL, skipping shirtless through the end zone, giving the deuces to the fans. Of course, this would be the end for Antonio Brown in Tampa Bay, and it was bizarre. It was one of the stranger things I think, ever seen on a football field, and in general, kind of given the situation, one of the stranger things I've seen in sports. This kind of just a very public exit right in the middle of the game, right in the middle of the Bucs having the football and trying to drive down the field and get back in this game. They were going to have to do it without Antonio Brown, and would have to go on the rest of the season without him. And we'll kind of get on to the way the season ended, but as strange as this was, and in some cases you kind of look back on it and be like, well, that was just crazy and kind of a little funny. But I think the sad reality of this for the Bucs was it almost, I would say, derailed their chances of repeating as Super Bowl champions. I mean, they with the way the wide receiver situation had gotten to after this, I mean, Chris Godwin had already had a season-ending injury, and then you have Antonio Brown just leaving. It left you with Mike Evans, and there was Rashad Perriman, who you had just brought in. You had Cyril Grayson, who we'll get onto in a little bit, and Tyler Johnson. Those guys. It was leaving the Bucs a little bare at the wide receiver position, and you kind of wonder what would have happened if this moment had never occurred. Both in terms of the Bucs season, in terms of whatever the rest of AB's career would have been, and you never know. You never know. But AB said goodbye, but the game did go on. And the drive went on. The Bucs would actually, just moments after that, they would get back into the game with a Cameron Brate touchdown catch, a 4-yarder from Brady to make it 24-17. And then the Bucs got within 24-20 a little bit later, halfway through the fourth. Ryan Suckup hit a 27-yard field goal and got the Bucs within just 4 points. The Jets, though, were about to put the game away, much like I mentioned earlier in the opening game of this video. The Bucs were trying to drive down the field, and Godwin fumbled the ball away. This was a little different, but the Jets were just about to do it. They were at the 7-yard line with over 2 minutes left, facing a 4th and 2. And instead of kicking a field goal to make it 27-20, they tried to go for the kill. They tried to go for the win and make sure that Brady didn't get the ball back. And instead, they ran a quarterback sneak with Zach Wilson, 2 yards away from the line to gain, and he was stuffed for no gain at all. So the Bucs they took over on their own 7. So in that reality, or in that sense, they were pinned back, but you gave Tom Brady another chance to go beat you with a touchdown, and Brady did what Brady does. Of course he did. Down Godwin, who had gotten hurt earlier back in December, and then without Antonio Brown, who of course did this earlier in the game, he was down to kind of the bare bones of the receiver room. But 2 guys in particular stepped up. Tyler Johnson, who you see on the screen, is one of them. He was huge on this drive. I mentioned, I think in last week's video, that big catch he had against the Saints being his defining moment, kind of forgetting that, this drive alone here was another big moment for him, in his Buccaneer career. Opened things up, an 8-yard catch by Tyler Johnson, then a 6-yard pass to Cyril Grayson, and then another 6-yarder to Johnson, got the Bucs to the 30-yard line. But by that point, there was still only just a minute left. Like they only gotten 23 yards, and they killed about a minute off the clock. But then it was Johnson making a 27-yard catch to the Jets' 43, and then Grayson caught a 10-yard pass. And then just 15 seconds left, Brady went deep, and he found Cyril Grayson for a 33-yard touchdown, and that gave the Bucs an improbable late lead over the Jets. This was a struggle, but they got the lead back here. 15 seconds to go. And then Le'Veon Bell, he got the 2-point conversion to make it 28-24 Buccaneers. And then they would close it out from there. On the final play of the game, Ross Cockrell forced a fumble that Anthony Nelson recovered, and that sealed it. The Bucs escaped with a win. They lost the receiver in the process. It was the Bucs' first road win over the Jets and matched their franchise first road win with the Jets ever, and matched their franchise record for wins with their 12th. Of course, they would go on the next week to get their 13th, thus franchise record, 13 wins the following week. But Brady was the hero in this one. Of course, he was. Brady went 34 of 50 for 410 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did have an interception, but he led the way in this win. Gronk had 7 catches for 115 yards, and Mike Evans caught 4 passes for 47 yards and a touchdown. But like I said, it was late. It was Tyler Johnson and Cyril Grayson Jr. who starred in the game-winning drive, which was a 93-yard drive in 9 plays. It took 1:57, left no time for the Jets to come back and try to stun the Bucs. It was a big late-season win for the Bucs, and helped them on their way into the playoffs. Of course, they would open the their playoff run with a home win over the Eagles, and that brings us to our next game, which was the NFC divisional round against the Los Angeles Rams. This is actually only the second loss on this 50-game list, and I will say it's the second and final game. We talked earlier in the list about the Bucs lost to the Colts in that Monday Night Football comeback way back in 2003 against Tony Dungy, Peyton Manning, and the Colts. That was just a memorable game that we had to include, and this is another one where ended up being a heartbreaker for the Bucs, but one of the more memorable games the franchise has played, especially in recent years, but potentially ever as well. The roadmap before this game seemed to be there for a repeat. Even despite the injury to Tristan Wirfs, the loss of Chris Godwin for the year, Antonio Brown leaving, the roadmap was still there as the top-seeded Packers had lost to the Jimmy Garoppolo-led 49ers the night before. So that meant if the Bucs could beat the Rams in this game, it would set up the first home NFC championship game in franchise history against those 49ers, who you would have thought the Bucs would have, they'd be favored against that team. The Bengals were the ones who ended up representing the AFC, and as good as that team was, the Rams would go on to beat them in the Super Bowl. I think the Bucs are favored in that one as well. And you might be talking about the Bucs being back-to-back Super Bowl champions. So the roadmap was there, despite the Bucs losses that they had at different positions, but it wasn't pretty early on. Before I get on to that, actually, the Tristan Wirfs injury was rough. The Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown absences were rough, but even then, they had Cyril Grayson and Brashad Perriman who had stepped up at different points down the stretch. They were also both out in this game. So the Bucs were down to the bare bones of this roster at this point. And the Rams took advantage early. They went up 27-3, and they were up 27-3 as late as the 3:03 mark in the third quarter before Ryan Succop hit a 31-yard field goal to make it 27-6. From there, though, it's kind of the magic that we talk about with Brady. It kind of even was on the defensive side of the ball as well, because the Bucs got back into this one. Jamel Dean forced a fumble that was recovered by Sean Murphy-Bunting, which gave the Bucs offense a short field. There was a short field that the Bucs took advantage of. A 1-yard touchdown run by Leonard Fournette made it 27-13 late in the third. And then things got really weird. After a 3-and-out by the Rams, Von Miller forced a Tom Brady sack fumble on the first play of the Bucs' next drive. But then something was going on in the cosmos, because a bad snap on the very first play of the next Rams drive was recovered by Jason Pierre-Paul, which got the ball back to the Bucs. And it was one of those things where when Von Miller got to Brady for that sack fumble, it kind of felt over. It felt like, all right, there's not really a comeback in this. It's not going to happen. But that feeling only lasted one play as the Bucs got the ball right back. Tampa Bay would turn it over on downs in its next 2 possessions, but it benefited then from a Matt Gay missed field goal, keeping them within 27-13. And then Brady went to work with under 4 minutes to go. He found Scotty Miller for 19 yards and then Leonard Fournette for 3. And then he connected with Mike Evans on a big 55-yard touchdown. Evans beating Jalen Ramsey for the touchdown, making it 27-20 with 3 minutes and 20 seconds to go. So Bucs were still in it. 3:20 left. The Bucs were still in it. And then Ndamukong Suh forced a fumble on the second play of the Rams' next drive, and that really, really had the Bucs back in it. The Bucs went back to work on a short field. They had recovered at the LA 30. It was Levante David fittingly recovering that ball, and the Bucs would cash in on it On a 4th and 1 at the LA 9-yard line, it was Leonard Fournette who broke free with 45 seconds to go. 9-yard touchdown run, and the point after made it 27-27. Unfortunately for the Bucs, that would be too much time left on the clock for Matt Stafford and the Rams for a variety of reasons, which we'll get on to. But you think about, what if and what could have, would have, should have, all that. Leonard Fournette breaking free on a 4th and 1 for this touchdown. You got to go for the touchdown. Obviously, you're down, and you're down, but you need the touchdown to tie the game. So it's not like this is something where you can hold on and kick a field goal. But if he just gets 1 yard there, you're killing more time, and then you have yourself with 4 downs to go inside the 10-yard line, and you never know. Maybe the Bucs tie it up with less time left, and they go to overtime. Again, this is all a big what if, and there's a lot of what ifs for this season and this potential Super Bowl repeat. But anyway, 27-27, little time left, and then disaster struck for the Bucs, of course. They gotten back to 27-27 after being down 27-3 in the second half. And, everybody talks about the zero blitz call from Todd Bowles, and that was one thing. But, the miscommunication or lack of communication, the call, just for whatever reason, didn't get to everyone. And that was that. It was the Cooper Kupp catch, deep down the field, 44 yards, beating Antoine Winfield Jr. They went for Stafford, and they nearly got to him, even having miscommunicated and not really communicated that call in. So again, another what if. What if the call gets in, or what if they just get to Stafford before he can make that throw? They didn't, though. That's not what happened. Kupp makes the catch, and that sets up Matt Gay, the former Buccaneer, to hit a game-winning 30-yard field goal, ending Tampa Bay's dreams of a Super Bowl repeat. It was devastating. I remember walking back to my car after, hour and a half after the game, and just thinking, what did I just watch? It was a 27-3 deficit, where it was kind of like the whole game you felt like, wow, this is a bitter end for the Bucs, repeat dreams and all that. And then the absolute elation the Bucs fans, had, and the way that stadium was going late in the fourth quarter, to all of the air being sucked out by that 44-yard completion and then the game-winning field goal. It was crazy. It was a crazy game. And again, fittingly on this list because it was memorable. It was painful. And a lot of Buccaneer fans would probably hate me for putting this on the list and reminding them of it. But it was a memorable game. It was one of the crazier ones in playoff history and Buccaneer history, especially. It was crazy. And of course, what would happen right after this was Tom Brady would retire just about a week after this game. I remember, that happening, and it was kind of a shock. It felt like he still had a year left on his contract, and you're like, okay, well, the Bucs are now without Tom Brady, and what happens? And, he came back, 40 days later, and the way the 2022 season went, and even aside from the division title, this game against the Rams felt like it almost would have been a more fitting end for Brady. He's the GOAT. He had this crazy comeback, and kind of like in professional wrestling, when you kind of got like the old guy maybe in a retirement match, and he's fighting, he makes his way back, makes his huge comeback, and then for whatever reason, gets hit with a move, and he goes out on his back, and he loses, and that's it. But that wasn't the case, of course, as Brady would decide to return. Again, we keep doing what ifs here in this video, but what happens? What if in that alternate reality where Brady doesn't return? Bruce Arians might not retire, because one of the whole big things Arians said when he retired was Brady coming back felt like he could hand the team over to Todd Bowles in a good situation. Maybe, Kyle Trask ends up being the starter in 2022, and then you never know if the chain of events leading to Baker Mayfield's arrival happens. So really, really strange, kind of think about, when Brady retired in 2022, at the end of the 2021 season, if he had just stayed retired, what do the Bucs look like even right now? It's kind of bizarre to think about. But anyway, Brady did come back, and aside from all of the, the personal stuff that he went through, and kind of just the up and down nature of that team, it didn't feel as magical as 2020 did, didn't feel as magical as 2021 did, but Tom Brady was still the Bucs quarterback for a third year. And I think there's, the further we get removed from that, you kind of think, okay, like if you're going to offer me 3 years of Tom Brady in a Bucs uniform versus 2, you're going to take the 3, even knowing everything we know. So Brady did come back, and largely forgettable regular season, but the Bucs rebounded from being 6-8 after Week 15 to win on Christmas night in Arizona, and that set up this New Year's Day game against the Panthers as our final game in this video. They would have to beat the Panthers to clinch the NFC South, which would be the first division title repeat in franchise history if they could do it. And this was kind of a microcosm of the whole season, though, because it didn't come easy. Carolina is not that great of a team in this season, but Sam Darnold late in the season was kind of playing a little bit better, and he had the Panthers up 14-0 by the halfway mark in the second quarter as Darnold hit Tommy Tremble, Buccaneer killer for some reason, and DJ Moore for touchdowns. But the Bucs finally did get on the board with 2:10 left in the first half as Brady found Mike Evans for a 63-yard touchdown, and that kind of was the preview of what the rest of the afternoon would be as Mike Evans just took this game over. After Devin White recovered a fumble on the next Carolina drive, Ryan Suckup hit a field goal, making it 14-10 with 1:09 left in the half. Even still, Darnold had the Panthers up early out of the break in the third quarter, hitting Shi Smith for a touchdown. That made it 21-10, but the greatness of Brady and Evans, that duo, it resurfaced again, and this was one of their more memorable performances together, honestly. The two linked up again for a 57-yard touchdown with just a minute and 1 second after the Panthers' last touchdown. So that got the Bucs with back right in it, and then 30-yard touchdown pass from Brady to Evans capped off a 92-yard touchdown drive, and that came after the Panthers' punt. So the defense kind of got them back in it, and then it was just up to Brady and Evans to kind of make this thing happen. Anthony Nelson would later get a sack fumble on Darnold to set up a short touchdown drive, which was capped off by a Tom Brady QB sneak, one last QB sneak for the GOAT. That made it 30-21. Panthers did get back within 6 on a field goal on their next drive before the Bucs went 3-and-out. And after that 3-and-out, at the time it was a rookie, Jake Camarda, who actually became a little bit of a hero for what was honestly a strange play on the punt, as it was a bad snap, kind of recovered it, and then he rolled out to, I believe it was his left. He rolled out to his left and sent the ball downfield out of desperation. Honestly, not a bad punt with the pressure that he was under. He was flagged for an ineligible downfield kick, which set up a re-kick, which then he downed at the 8-yard line. So one, that, after the re-kick, pinning them inside the 10 was huge, but think about how he failed to recover the ball, or had he simply just fallen on the loose ball or been tackled, the Panthers would have taken over around midfield with a chance to go down and win the game. Instead, the Bucs held on for the win, and the defense, did it the rest of the way. And this would ultimately be Brady's last win in the NFL. He had one final gaudy stat line in a Bucs uniform. He went 34 of 45 for 432 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also added a rushing touchdowns, had 4 total touchdowns on the day. Mike Evans was the big star, of course, extending his 1,000-yard season streak to 9 in this game. And he essentially put the team on his back in this one, carrying them to a division title, 10 catches, 207 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And like I mentioned, this season didn't have the height of 2020 and 2021, and often kind of gets looked back on with frustration. And I definitely get that because of, the Bucs went 8-9, and it wasn't a pretty season by any means. But this was the first division title repeat in Bucs history. They were back-to-back NFC South champions, and it was the second in what is now a 4-year streak atop the division for Tampa Bay. So, the Bucs have won back-to-back NFC South championships. They're going for 5 in a row this year, and when you look back on 2022, that is probably the bright spot and the legacy of that season's team was getting them to back-to-back titles. And Brady, of course, playing in a Buccaneer uniform for his final season, his last 3 seasons of his career. And this is actually, funnily enough, the last Brady game on this list. We have covered quite a few of them over the last few weeks, and that will do it for week 9 of our series. So we'll be back with our final video of the series next week, and it will be 5 games from the Baker Mayfield era, pretty fittingly, as we'll cover some of the most memorable games from the first couple years of Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, and that will lead us right into another season with Baker Mayfield leading the way for the Buccaneers, starting with that week 1 game against the Falcons in Atlanta. But like I said, we'll be wrapping it up next week. And then until then, be sure to stay tuned to PewterReport.com, Pewter Report TV, and all of our social channels at Pewter Report. as we continue to bring you the best Buccaneer coverage around, especially, we got season preview content rolling into the start of 50th season next Sunday. We're still covering the aftermath of the cuts, roster cuts, and getting the roster down to 53, the assembling of the practice squad. So plenty more coming over the next week and a half or so, leading right up to that season opener in Atlanta. But for now, thank you all so much for your support. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time for the final edition of the Bucs 50 Most Memorable Games.